You're listening to the Marriage Clinic Podcast, a podcast on love, marriage, and personal development. Our purpose is to inspire and equip you with knowledge and skills to enable you to have lasting and fulfilling relationships. Now your host, Joshua Mulgrew.
Hello, this is the Marriage Clinic Podcast, a podcast about love, marriage, and your personal development. My name is Dr. Joshua Mulgrew, or you can call me Uncle Josh. Once a week, we come to you with information that is meant to build you, help you in your relationships, in your marriages, and also just to become a better person out there. So far, we've been dealing with very interesting topics, and I want to encourage you to go on our channels, especially on YouTube, where you can find so many previous podcasts that we have that will be a blessing to you. So come on, please like, share this with somebody and send it to somebody you think will need it. This is the Marriage Clinic Podcast. I'm glad to have you here today. Okay, we're going to jump right in. Last week we started speaking on how forgiveness can transform your marriage. Now, if you're a single person out there and immediately I said how forgiveness can transform your marriage and you've turned away, please turn back. You will need it now, you will need it in the future. You will need this information to help somebody, and you will also need this information one day, hopefully when you are married, and even when you are talking to other people who have marital issues. So please do not run away from this podcast if you are single. I wonder what's happening with my voice. Anyway, so let's go. So last week I began to talk about how unforgiveness affects a marriage and why you need to learn to forgive, and how resentment will build up and it begins to affect various areas of your marriage. Today, or in this week's episode, I want to tell you why forgiveness is important. I want to explain to you that forgiveness is important and let you understand that you can't be married and not forgive. I said last week, and I've said it several times, that marriage is two people who have come together and decided they are going to forgive each other for their shortcomings. You will have shortcomings. The beauty of marriage is that no one is perfect. So you make mistakes, he makes mistakes, he forgives you for your mistakes, you forgive him for his mistakes, and the two of you learn to live better with each other. So why is forgiveness necessary? If you can't forgive, you can't be married. Let's remember that. If you can't forgive for the big things and the small things, you can't be married. Let's remember this. Anytime you see a couple, let's imagine together that you see a couple who are gray-haired, they are walking together and you see them and you are like, wow, I want this. Probably they have, let's say 10 is too short to say they are gray-haired. Let's say they have 40 to 70 years marital experience. And you look at it and you're like, wow, I just want this. This is how marriages are supposed to be, not the microwave marriages we see today. That's true. But if you interviewed them, you would find out that those two people working together have been forgiving each other for decades and probably even forgave each other that day that you see them. So you can't be married unless you forgive. When you choose not to forgive, it affects you first. A wise man once said that living in unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die. What you need to understand is that if you don't forgive, it affects your health, it affects your mental well-being, it affects your ability to function in the marriage, it affects your ability to relate with other people, and it will ultimately spill over into other areas of your marriage. So one important thing you have to keep in mind is that forgiveness is not for my partner. Forgiveness is for me. If you were here, I would ask you to say that again. Forgiveness is not for your partner. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is not a favor you are doing to the person who hurt you. Forgiveness is releasing yourself to live your best life. So even when they are not sorry, we forgive. And even when they have not asked for forgiveness, we forgive. So let's remember that forgiveness is important. But what I really want to zero in today on is to take you through some steps that can help you forgive your partner. So let's assume that as you're listening to this, maybe you're married to your husband or you're married to your wife, and they probably have done something that really has got to you. And you're asking yourself, how can I ever come to a place where I forgive him for doing that? And sometimes forgiveness is not only about the big things, because whenever we talk about forgiveness, people immediately think he cheated, I cheated. But in marriage, you have to do a lot more forgiveness about the small things. The small things about when I said it, she didn't take me serious. The small things like she's acting disrespectful. The small things like he's always late. The small things like he forgot my birthday. The small things like he came home late. I keep saying they are small things, but these are the things that create the biggest issues in marriage. So when we talk about forgiveness, I'm going to walk you through some steps that are going to help you be able to forgive. Step number 1, acknowledge the pain. There's no shame in admitting that what she did hurt me. What he did hurt me. I am disappointed by what happened. A lot of the times, guys, especially husbands, try to mask their pain and disappointment in anger. But when you are on your own, you should be able to admit to yourself that the way she spoke to me in public and in front of my friends made me feel less than a man. Or the fact that he complimented another lady right in front of me made me feel like he was disrespecting me. Or the fact that he's refused to eat my meals is a problem for me. The first step in forgiving anyone is identifying why you are hurt in the first place. And the answers could be, he made me not feel beautiful. She made me feel less than a man. I felt like I had wasted my money. I felt like I was a little boy. Acknowledge whatever it is that has happened, that has hurt you, and is making you not want to forgive the person for what they've done. So number 1, acknowledge it, recognize it, and remember this, recognizing that you are hurt about something doesn't mean you are wallowing in the hurt. Can I explain? It's one thing to say, based on how, let's use a boss as an example, based on how my boss spoke to me, I felt very disrespected and I don't think he takes me seriously. That's recognizing it. Sitting down in the office the whole day and saying, no one respects me in this office, that is wallowing. So when we talk about acknowledging the pain, it doesn't mean that you have to keep wallowing in the pain throughout the day or throughout the week. It just means recognizing that this person hurts me. Brings me to the second thing that you need to do. Remember, as you choose to forgive, remember that you yourself have also been forgiven. The beauty of marriage is that it will show you are not perfect. And when you remember your faults, it softens you towards forgiving the other person. If you're a person of faith, in the Bible, it says that because you have been forgiven much by Christ, you should also forgive your neighbor. So part of what helps you to forgive, or another step that helps you to forgive, is that you recognize the fact that me forgiving is just me returning a favor that has also been done to me in the past in this marriage and will be done to me in the future in this marriage. Because sometimes, even while you are getting angry, you also do something that hurts the other person. So remember you have forgiven and let that soften your heart. Which brings me to number 3. It is necessary that you speak to the person about what has happened. Okay? Don't avoid it. Don't sweep it under the carpet. Don't make it bigger than it is. Confront your partner and tell your partner in very simple terms, this is what you did. This is how it makes me feel. And this is what you can do to repair the situation. Let's use an example. Let's say a lady gets dressed with her husband. He's not paying attention. She asks him, as most wives would, should I go with the green earrings or should I go with the purple earrings? And he says, go with anyone that you want. You guys are going for a wedding. So I'm painting a picture here. You're going for a wedding ceremony. And during the wedding, he's not really paying attention to you. And during the reception, you are seated at a table with him, and maybe a younger lady sits across him, and he looks at the lady and he's like, wow, I really like your necklace. You're really looking pretty in that dress. You get offended. He hasn't looked at you, and you may be asking questions. Is he no longer attracted to me? Why is he doing this? Why is he disrespecting me? So maybe you're in a bit of a mood. You probably may get home, want to address it or not address it. But as you go through step 1 of acknowledging that you are in pain, 2, remembering that you've also done things that he has forgiven you for, you may want to have a conversation with him and say, listen, 2 days ago on Saturday, while we were preparing, I really wanted you to give me your impressions of what I was wearing, and you wouldn't look at me. And when we sat down at the table, you passed a very beautiful compliment to the lady who was sitting across us. What you did made me feel bad because I want approval from you. I want to feel like my husband is looking at me. And you not giving me that and giving it to a stranger made me feel hurt. That is you confronting the person with what they have done to hurt you. Sometimes he didn't even know. Or he recognizes that, okay, what I did is wrong and I must reform. But you need to give the person a chance by informing them about what they have done. So we don't do that thing, what's wrong? Nothing. What's wrong? If you don't know, and then you give it 3 weeks before you say it. By then, he has also exhausted himself on it, and by the time you mention it, he's also upset, or vice versa. So that is what is done. Then brings me to the next thing. You need to remember that forgiveness is a process and not an event. Okay? You know that thing they just say, okay, say sorry. Sorry. It's been a long day. You know that thing where they say apologize, and they say from today, forget about it. Forgiveness and forgetting are 2 separate things. Number 1, forgiveness is a process. When I say I forgive you, I am beginning the process. Let's use the example of a cut. Let's say you are cut by a knife or a glass cuts you. And let's say the wound is washed out. And then let's say some antibiotics is put on it. A plaster or a band-aid is put on it. And maybe you are giving some antibiotics to take. The healing process has started. The healing process has not ended. When does the wound heal? It will be difficult, and all of you could look at yourselves and you see a scar somewhere. It will be difficult to say the day the scar healed, but you would be able to tell when you started treating it. That's the same thing about forgiveness. The person apologizes or doesn't apologize, and you say, I forgive you. Or you say in your mind, I've let this issue go. There are times you will remember it and be hurt or be upset and bring it up again. However, it is a process. Gradually, memory of the event does not give you as much pain as it used to. Uncle Josh, how long does it take for me to heal? I can't tell. For some people, and depending on what has been done, for some people it may take a few days. For others, it may take a few hours. For some, the process may take months. And in some situations, the process of forgiveness takes years. Now, let me speak to the offender. It is wrong for you to say, you two, up to now, you still haven't forgiven me. You don't know how the situation hurts the person. So let's remember that forgiveness is a process. Running out of time, let me bring in the few others. Brings me to the last but one. You need to differentiate forgiveness from restoration of the relationship. I say this all the time. Forgiveness is your responsibility. Building trust is the responsibility of the person who offended. So I have to forgive you, and I forgive you for you, and I forgive you mostly for me. But the fact that I've forgiven you doesn't mean I have to trust you. Now, if you want me to trust you, you must now start modified behavior that proves to me that you are worthy of trust. So remember that there's a difference between forgiveness and restoration of relationship. Forgiveness is the responsibility of the person who was hurt. Restoration of the relationship is the responsibility of the person who offended. Brings me down to the last part of it as I'm ending on this. Make room for the person's weaknesses. Behavior change takes time, and there are people who are going to have to do things over and over again before they become perfect. The fact that the person has said sorry does not mean he may not do it again. So you make room for the fact that he or she could slip up again, and I may have to forgive them again. And this is how I prepare for it. This has been the Marriage Clinic podcast, a podcast about love, marriage, and your personal development. We will be back with Ask Uncle Josh. Welcome back with Ask Uncle Josh. This question is coming from Ima. You said I can mention your name. I'm struggling with the dowry expectations set by my fiance's family. They are beyond my financial capabilities. How can we navigate the situation without disrespecting her family's traditions? How can we navigate without disrespecting her family's traditions? So let's say you've gone in Africa and in Ghana, in most African countries, the man pays a dowry for the woman. If you are American or you are European, probably you don't do that before. We as Africans, we pay a dowry. Now, when the dowry is too high, it requires some interventions. First of all, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. So the first thing I would say is that it is your fiancé who has to go back and speak to her family, telling them that these demands are too high. I'm marrying a young guy, he's starting off with life, he can't afford this. I've heard situations where the amounts being asked for are so exorbitant. So, what you do is you talk to your fiancé to go and talk to her parents. Okay? After she talks to them, if they are still adamant, then now you must look for someone the family respects. Could be her pastor, it could be someone. I've heard of situations where the pastor goes to speak to the father and the father says, okay, I'm willing to reduce the dowry. So you get someone who can go and speak. Then you also express the fact that I love your daughter, but I can't afford this. If they are still insisting after all these interventions, you may want to ask yourself if you really want to get married into that family. Because this is just the beginning of very interesting demands that are going to be happening throughout the marriage. So I would say get someone who can intervene. Let her try intervening first, and then get people who can intervene, and then see what you can do. And do the best that you can, but if you can't afford it, please do not force yourself. All right. So thank you so much. Glad coming to you. We'll be back next week. God bless you and good night.